a lot of indie stuff gets lost, and then it only picks up steam. And this is when, platforms like Twitch, YouTube, even Instagram and TikTok become crucial because those games that people didn't know about, all of a sudden now people are streaming them and they're like, wow, I never played that. Oh, I should check it out. So a lot of people, they never understand the validity and the necessity of services like Twitch or, like I said, YouTube, etc. But I'm like, listen, those games that people have never seen, people never slept on. I mean, I got put onto a game.
Yeah. I lay on the scare, you gotta glow, you gotta glow. She had my attention, she gotta know.
I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of the Let's Get That podcast. I'm your host Zeke, and in this episode, I have Richard Butler of RageWorks to speak about podcasting, comics, and more. You can find out more information about RageWorks by clicking the link in the description below. I did a content warning for any strong language used in this episode, and hope you have a nice day and enjoy the show. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. So, the first question is, what would your origin story be, and how would you like to represent it?
My origin story, from a content creation standpoint, is I've been podcasting since 2006. I started when podcasting first debuted on iTunes. And at the time I started with the My Take Radio podcast. It was covering video games, entertainment, nerd culture, MMA, and professional wrestling. And the way it worked out back then, it was just a Logitech headset recording with Audacity and putting it out there. And you never really got you didn't know how many people were listening, who was interacting. You just hope for the best. Over time, it just became, it stopped being fun. So I got burned out, took a break. Then in 2009, we decided to relaunch the podcast using a live component, using the Blog Talk Radio service. And the thing about that service, which was great, was we could take live calls. We had a full chat, and we even had somebody to screen the calls. So we were able to invite guests and pretty much run it like almost like a traditional radio show, which was awesome. And then we would do that from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. completely live. And then after the show wrapped at 2 a.m., I would then edit both audio and video to release it essentially the next day. And while that was fun, it takes its toll on you. I mean, as a content creator, editing is time consuming. So we ended up pretty much breaking up two segments. We put MMA and wrestling together, and then video games and entertainment together, and spread it across 2 days. So we did a live show Wednesday and a live show Thursday. And in doing so, it allowed us to kind of control the burnout, but continue to give people the content that they liked. At around the 400 episode mark, I said to myself, I think this is a good time to retire the podcast, mostly because, 400 episodes is a long time. Plus, a lot of the writers on our site started getting into podcasting. They started getting the bug. And as a result, a lot of them launched their own shows, which we decided to, at the time, I said, listen, everybody wants to do a show. Why don't we just launch a podcast network under the same umbrella as the website? And pretty much I'll help you guys get your shows out, etc. Teach you guys how to do it. And next thing you know, had a podcast network full of shows. But like anything else, you can't escape podcasting. So I did a podcast for a while with a friend of mine about comic books. And after, we hung that up because it was limited, I decided to launch an interview-based series, which I've been doing ever since, called Toys and Tech of the Trade. And we're approaching our 50th episode of that podcast. But it's been great because we're not doing it live. We're doing pre-recorded. It's easier to edit. I can control the flow of the guests. Most of the interviews are maybe 45 minutes to an hour. So the editing is less. And it just lets me focus on growing the network and pretty much continuing to create written and video-based content for the overall brand.
Nice. And before we pick that apart, how would you like to represent that origin story?
I like representing that origin story by using the medium of podcasting. I feel that it's one of the few mediums that can be genuinely approached by everybody, regardless of age, gender, sexual orientation, whatever. Because the thing about it is, you're the people are invested in you. So people are tuning in to hear your voice, your words, your messages. So in doing that, I feel that that represents not just my origin story, but many other people's, because the barrier of entry is very, very small. So you don't need a $2,000 microphone. You don't need the latest mixer. You have one of the most powerful tools in your toolkit with your phone. You can record an entire podcast as a voice note, send it to your computer, cut it up, and maybe just pay for some hosting, which might run you $10 or $15. But before you know it, your words, your messages, your feelings can reach a worldwide audience.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Definitely. One of the easiest things is you need your voice.
Yep.
And a recorder.
100%.
So you pretty much got into this since 2006. It kind of was like the spark around that time. That's before the big boom.
Wow. The spark actually was when podcasting first started. I started consuming them as a listener and connected with a lot of different shows. There was a group of guys in Cleveland. They did a show which was Video Game News Radio. I really got into it because I thought that their approach, their delivery, it felt less like an industry type of a show and more like a couple of friends sitting down talking about the best games, the worst games, and just talking shop. It almost felt like you were in a barbershop on a Saturday hearing people talk about video games. And I like that. I like that it was unfiltered. It was gritty. And most importantly, the guys all got along and had a great relationship. So I started listening to that podcast consistently, sending questions. They used to take listener calls through Skype. So I would call in periodically. And then one day they were like, oh, why don't you come on and do a show with us? So I did a show with them. And we built a really good friendship off of that. And over time, they were like, oh, man, why don't you do a podcast? And I'm like, I don't know. And then one of their listeners, a guy from Canada, was like, hey, listen, I'm launching a podcast. Would you like to, record some episodes with me? You could as a guest host if you want, or just as a guest over a few episodes. So I did that with them, and same thing. Hey, why don't you do a podcast? And after a while, you start hearing the same message. Clearly, it's being put into the void for a reason. So that was pretty much the origin story of why I started doing it. Because again, I was able to just share my thoughts with a group of people that hopefully shared the same interests I did.
It's funny, like life is telling you something, and you just like, maybe not me.
Yeah, I'm telling you that happens even now. You go through a lot of, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, because that would involve like you're faking it, but it happens that you're putting stuff out there and you're like, 5 or 6 people listen, and you say that, but I always tell people all the time, how many times can you walk into a room and command the entire audience of a room, whether it's 5 people, 50 people, or 100 people? And once people kind of get that brought into perspective, their opinion on podcasting changes, because people get suckered in with the big numbers. And that's good. Don't get me wrong. Getting 1,000 downloads, 2,000 downloads, 5, it's awesome. It's amazing. But some people can barely interact with 5 people in a given day. And you get 5 people consistently consuming your content. I mean, at the end of the day, and there was a podcaster named Pat Flynn, he talked about this, you really want to just build 100 true fans. And they kind of help you grow your content and get your message out there. If you can cultivate 100 true fans, then you're winning.
Yeah. I hear that in music. Like, if you have you're gonna make more money with 100 true fans than an industry amount of fans.
100%. Absolutely. You put out something for $1 that 100 people consume. That's $100. It doesn't get easier than that. And these are people that genuinely ride or die for your content.
Yep. And then your audience, so you kept pivoting a lot of times. You're like, I get burnt out, but there's another way to do this.
Yeah, it happens a lot, and life gets in the way. And the thing about it is, like, they always show a lot of memes online of the guy chipping away at the cave, and then he stops, and then on the other side of the cave is the treasure, and he just needed to chip away a little more. And I've always felt that way with podcasting. Every time I kind of felt burned out, I was like, maybe you just need to approach it differently, or maybe you just need to give yourself some time away from the mic, or maybe you just need to reinvent what you're doing to make it more enjoyable. And I think that's part of the bigger reasons why I've continued to do this particular thing consistently for so long, because I never really gave up on it. I just had to find ways to continue making it enjoyable and motivational for me.
Yeah, like you just need that little shake up every single time. For like, let me start my own podcast. There's another one, and then I have a network.
Mm-hmm. And doing more guest work, visiting shows like yours and countless others. Just again, it reinforces just paying it forward. Podcasting has done a lot for me, for the brand that I have, for the work that I do, that it would only be fair to go out there and share more stories so that people can draw the same kind of inspiration that I did and create more stuff, because we need more creators out there. We need more creators. I feel that we need more minority creators. I'm a huge supporter of that, because I think that, the minority voices are, I don't want to say they're underrepresented, but they're pre-packaged. In other words, like, minority voices are taken and they're gift wrapped in a culture. So in other words, you could be a person of color, and the automatic presumption in some cases is, oh, well, if you gift wrap it in hip hop, then it'll reach more people. And you don't necessarily have to do that. I remember, growing up, and people say this all the time, like, well, we grew up, I don't know based on how old you are, but when you were growing up, like saying you were into comic books and all that stuff, people didn't think that was cool. Like, they did, but again, it was a very small niche of people. If you didn't play sports, you didn't do, again, all the stuff that checks off boxes, that wasn't cool. It's only now that it's cool to, have patches on your jackets from comic books you like and watch anime and do all this stuff. 20 years ago, it wasn't the same thing. And I think that a big part of that is just that culture shift. And I think that putting out more content, more unique content, is going to allow people to change the narrative. I mean, it's the same thing with Twitch. Like, a lot of Twitch creators, the people tune into Twitch, to watch the games, but they're invested in the people.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny how, like, I seen a video, like, how McDonald's always use, like, whatever popular black music is at the time to then market to black people.
Yep. It's the oldest trick in the book. I mean, look at, and I don't want to derail our conversation, but think about it. Look at McDonald's. Think about all the quote unquote collab meals that they're doing. And you go to any hood, any project, any neighborhood, depending on what state or city you're in, McDonald's is always there. Always there. So, oh, you want to get the J Balvin meal, or you want to go and get, this guy meal, that guy. And it's just like, there's nothing special about it. It's what that person orders, and you're just gift wrapping it and selling it as something more to get that particular audience. I mean, there was a report put out recently that McDonald's made more money during the pandemic than a lot of companies because of their quote unquote, all their collab meals that they put out.
Yep. And I think we could pivot now into the comic book section, since you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even in my childhood time, since I'm 23 right now, even then it didn't become popular until like college, like anime and everything like that.
100%. I think, with regards to that, it's the movies have helped. A lot of that stuff helps make things a little more readily accessible. But again, if you're not out there, being a champion for that stuff, it's always going to be looked at as something quote unquote not cool.
Yeah. So what got you into comics and everything for your childhood?
Man, I've been collecting books on and off throughout the years. I think I started collecting. My brother bought me one of my first books, and I've been collecting comics since then. Over the last uh 15 years, I want to say, I've scaled down in the purchasing of books because the collection got too big, and I started switching to reading books digitally. And the thing about it is, don't get me wrong, I still love my tangible books, but I always tell people, you got to ask yourself, are you a comic book collector or a comic book reader? Because if you're a comic book reader, you don't necessarily need to build a collection of thousands upon thousands of books. You can use Comixology or the Marvel Unlimited or DC, whatever it is, and read whatever books you want that way. Like you don't need to do that. But if you're looking at comic books as an asset, as well as just a fan of holding the physical product, then you got to know what you're getting yourself into. And I collected heavy through late 80s, early 90s. So, Spawn, all of the original Spawn stuff that came out, Savage Dragon, big Spider-Man stuff, a lot of the Venom books. And the thing about it is that collecting back then was just collecting. Like, yeah, there was a bit of investment to a point. Like, no, like back then, the biggest stuff you would chase after were number ones, first appearances, cool covers. Now forget it, especially now as a collector. Now every book has the potential to be worth something, because with the grading system, you could send your book out to get graded, and you could get that book could come rated at an 8 or a 9, and you can sit on that book for a few years, and it might be worth $10, but because it graded so high, it might be $200, $300 just because of the grade alone. So to that point, I tell people, if you're going to collect to read, do so, but you don't necessarily need to amass a giant collection unless you want to keep some of those to pass on. When my daughter gets of age to read books, I'll say, hey, I got these comics, you can have them, whatever. And, you continue that cycle.
Yeah, definitely. Because they take up space, but then
Yep.
and also like when you want to move, and like it's like a lot of logistical stuff, like moving and everything.
They take up, I look at comics like this. They take up space, they increase knowledge, but they create opportunity, because you might have a book or two in there that, they might pay for your college. They might pay for your rent. And, you got to look at it that way. Also, you can't, people romanticize collecting a lot. It's like, listen, you could collect for a little bit, get out of collecting, collect for investment. It's just a matter of personal preference.
Yeah, it goes back to the thing of just finding a different way, all the ways to see opportunities or something like that.
Absolutely.
So what you trying to say was like your favorite series?
And I was a big fan of, I went through a couple of different phases, but one book that consistently I always enjoyed was The Darkness. It was put out by Image and Top Cow, which was like a sub brand of Image. And everything about that series was just incredibly well done. I remember they even did a video game based on it, which was pretty solid at the time. It was a first person shooter, but it used a lot of the elements from the comic that made it very interesting. And the thing about the book of The Darkness that I like was that it kind of teased the line between being more adult, but also at the same time, it's a book that hasn't been touched by, oh, we need to make a movie out of this. Like I think that's one of the things I've enjoyed about like that series over the last few years, that there's so much great stuff in there, but they haven't found the way, or they haven't found the right creator to go and bring that to life for a bigger audience. I mean, they did it with Witchblade. I know Witchblade had a TV series for a few years, and it wasn't well received, but it was a property that got pulled out of the books and brought to the mainstream. Outside of that, I personally still read a lot of the the mainstream stuff. I still like Amazing Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man for the most part has always been consistently solid. On the DC side, it's a little tougher. I read a lot more Batman. a lot more Batman stuff, because again, it always got really, really dark, and the subject matter was more grounded to Batman's flaws. So a lot of the stuff always kind of dug into his shortcomings as a hero, because at the end of the day, you got this guy, he's running around, he's got no powers, he's convincing all these young kids to take up his initiatives of street justice. When there's thousands of different ways to do it, you've got one or two of them killed or hurt over the years. So there's a lot to unpack in the Batman stories, which is always cool. But that's kind of like been my reading. And now reading digitally, I started reading Invincible and before the animated series came out, and I was just blown away by the amount of storytelling. I wasn't a fan of the artwork initially. I kind of felt it was a little too cartoony for a book, but then after a while, I kind of just shut that off and was just immersed in how good the writing was. I almost equated to like the Clone Wars cartoon, the Star Wars cartoon. Like the animation isn't for everybody, but the storytelling is so good that you just look past it.
Yeah. I remember the game Darkness. I had Darkness too. That's what the guy with like the dark powers.
Yeah, he basically was able to create things out of darkness, or it'd be like little demons, little things. He was a mafia hitman, and basically his powers were they're passed from father to son. So he couldn't have any relationships with women, because the minute he was involved with a woman, they would instantly get pregnant, and the powers would get passed on, and he would die. So, for a good looking dude that's a mafia hitman, created a lot of other problems, because he couldn't go out there and do stuff. Plus, the thing about it is, even though his powers are quote unquote rooted like in an evil context, and even though his profession was evil, he had a code. So he kind of started shifting a little bit from just, being a hitman and actually being a hero, which was a nice way to watch that unfold over the series.
And then with Batman, there's a creator on TikTok called Red Panda who kind of made a whole series about like the Bat family, and Batman always trying to make a Robin out of somebody.
Yeah, Batman, I think it stems also from the fact that being a hero is lonely. And I think in Batman's case, you got a guy that pretty much took all his grief and weaponized it to quote unquote save other people. And the thing about it is, it just becomes a very lonely existence if you don't have those same kind of people around you. And for as much of a loner as he is, he's got a bunch of people that support what he does and care about his safety and well-being. So it's always an amazing thing to watch, because he always comes off like such a loner and such a badass. But it's like, between Alfred, all the different Robins, all the heroes that respect the dude, it's like you're a lot better off than you think. But I think that character, he needs that pain to keep him going. It's like that constant, like eventually you're gonna run out. Like it's like again like a different version of burnout. So he needs that keep going. Yep. He needs that rush. He needs that he needs to always be fighting for something. And I think that, giving him the different Robins, I think initially when they brought his son into the mix and he made his son a Robin, the complexities of the story were so good, because here you have this kid who grew up to be an assassin, who has all these skills, that now you have to deprogram and try to make him like a hero, but also try to make him a normal kid or somewhat normal kid in the same breath. And I think that it was just a good layer of a challenge for Batman. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like being an assassin is not great, but also being a superhero is not even, it's like slightly better, but it's still not the best. There's other dangers. I mean, a lot of I remember the Spider-Man story that everybody thinks is going to be part of the new movie, when he unveiled his identity in Civil War. And I remember that Aunt May got shot, and obviously it was as a result of him revealing that he was Spider-Man. Finds out that it was the Kingpin, goes to the jail, beats the brakes off the Kingpin, and he tells him, he goes, for years I've always held back, but don't think that if something happens to my Aunt May that I won't come back here and kill you. And the thing about it is, you say to yourself, oh, Spider-Man goes out there, he does whatever, but in that instance, you learned that he is substantially more powerful than he chooses to be, and that he always keeps it bottled up to do his job. And it just shows another side of the character, which I think is it's important for storytelling and for growth.
Yeah, it's just a show what, like, another layer of what they go through, not just saving people, but like also knowing what's their limit.
Yep. Because think about it, he did so much to try to keep his the people closest to him safe, and then he thought he was doing the right thing by revealing who he was, and it didn't work out that way.
Yeah. And you're also free to ask me questions if you have any that come up.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So yeah, and then with Spider-Man, the new movie gonna come out, everybody.
Yeah, I think they're borrowing from that story, from the One More, because the original version of that was One More Day. Mm-hmm. And after Aunt May got shot and all this stuff started happening, he got the deal from Mephisto that was essentially like, listen, I could make all this go away, but you got to give up, your relationship with Mary Jane and all this stuff. And he opted to do that. And you think about it, and it's like, yo, you're making a deal with the devil because things got so bad. And you were willing to sacrifice like a personal relationship for the sake of that. And that's kind of what they're teasing in this movie. Now, whether Doctor Strange is really Doctor Strange that's doing it or something else, obviously we got to wait and see. But the original story is One More Day. And, it's a solid read. Some people weren't a fan of the story, but the fact that Marvel is kind of leaning into it, I recommend people sit down and give it a read.
And then to switch it up a little bit, Swords and Smash now.
I've given, not that I've given up on Smash, but I feel like Smash Brothers has become, it's still like the game hasn't changed. The gameplay is still the same, but now the biggest selling point is what characters are in it. So it kind of has stolen a lot of what made the game fun, because everybody's like, oh, this character's in it, that character's in it. And at the end of the day, that was a game that was rooted in Nintendo's characters. And the fact that so many other characters can come in, and it's cool because they get more eyes on the game. But at the end of the day, it's a Nintendo-based game using Nintendo-based characters. And if you need these other characters to sell the game, what does that say about the work you're putting into the game?
Yeah, I think they're probably finding it too well, and then it was like, how can we make it? What can we do with it now?
Well, I think that this is, I've always said that like certain franchises, you don't need a new game every year. Like I think, like when you look at NFL games, basketball games, you don't need a new game every year. Like unless there's massive changes graphically or gameplay wise, it should be a release cycle of every 2 years. And then you just release patches and updates with updated rosters, etc. You keep that game fresh, because at the end of the day, you have somebody that invests $60, $70 depending on what console for this game. And Madden's a great example. By the time the June or July of the following year rolls out, that $70 copy of Madden is $5. It's worth $5 if you try to trade it in or get rid of it. So I think that sports games and just certain games in general should see like a 2-year release window. Like you don't need, Smash, it's been a few years for Smash, but when you think about it, they haven't innovated the gameplay as much as just here's a prettier version of the same game with more characters.
Yeah. And the like games. Yeah, I've definitely been hearing about that, about like having it just be like upgrades, because the game's pretty much the same. They might change something a little bit in terms of presentation or like a select mechanic.
and you get nickel and dimed with the DLC too. So when you think about it, you're getting a game that's 80% done, 90% done, and then you're paying for all the rest of the stuff. And where do you draw the line on what you need or you don't need? Like with Call of Duty, most times it's new skins, new guns. Okay, no problem. Because at the end of the day, you could still enjoy the game without those skins and without those guns. But then there's other games where it's like, oh, here's a whole other level, or here's a whole other campaign that you can extend the game. And I'm like, and then the worst part of that is that you do that, you spend the money on the campaign, then a year, a year and a half later, you get an ultimate edition of that game with all the DLC included that you paid, full price for over time. And the ratio and the expense is it's never the same.
Definitely. It's mostly just a fun time. Times you gotta be like, is it worth it now, or just I can just wait?
Yep. I mean, Assassin's Creed is good for that. I mean, I like the new Assassin's Creed games. They've gotten away from what the context of the game was originally about, but they add so much extra stuff to it. Oh, here's a new campaign. Here's new maps. Here's new this. Here's new that. And they keep the game going for sometimes 2-3 years. But the thing about it is that people are paying during that entire time that this stuff is coming out. So it kind of waters down a lot of the value of the game. And again, it's a risk versus reward. If you delay the game to put more stuff in it, then people get pissed off because they don't get the games at a timely level. And then the flip side, obviously, is if you put it out and then you put out more stuff with DLC, that $60 game becomes $100 game or $150 game. And, it's good if you're getting enjoyment out of it. Again, it's just risk versus reward and how much you're willing to invest in that level of enjoyment.
Yeah, people always be saying, like, back in my day, games were finished when they came out.
Yeah, but you know what the thing is? It's easy to go that route, but like there's always ways to keep the games fresh. I mean, look at Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto has been the same Grand Theft Auto for how many years now? And everybody thought that they would be getting a new one because of the new consoles. And all they're doing is remastering the trilogy and putting the trilogy out on new consoles. So, the only way that you're going to stop that is by not buying it. If you don't buy it, then Rockstar will get the message, be like, damn, this didn't work. We got to make a new game. We got to get a new game out there. But if you go and you got a new shiny PS5 or a new Xbox One X and you're like, oh, let me pick up the new GTA and just replay it all over again, you become part of the problem.
It's like, oh, it seemed to be working, so let's keep doing this.
I mean, that's how it is with the prices of games. When you put out a game, an Ultimate Edition or whatever, and you put the game out and you go, oh, here's this $200 Ultimate Edition. The goal is, oh, we're going to sell it and obviously make money. But the funny part is that if you don't buy it, they'll be like, oh, that was a failed experiment. But the minute that you pay that $200 and buy that Ultimate Edition, they'll be like, oh, we got one. If we got one, we can get two, we can get five.
So it's the multiplier. There seems to be an interest here.
Mm-hmm. That's the problem. I mean, the same thing with $70 games. Like now the games are, they went from 50 to 70. And yeah, the consoles are a little bit more, but it's like now you're essentially justifying a $70 game. And the thing about it is, what's to stop them from doing an $80 game in a few years?
Nothing changes.
Nope. And most of all, young kids, you're alienating your core audience because, it's easier to get a parent to give a kid $30 to buy a game, $40 to buy a game, hell, even $50. But now you're at $70 plus tax. It comes out to, $75 at least here in New York. A kid's getting $75 for a game that they might play 3 months and then get tired of it.
Yeah. I remember trying to convince my mother and my grandmother to buy me a game. Usually happens around Christmas and my birthday.
Yep.
I was like, now being an adult, I'm just like, is this game worth it? $65?
Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, what ends up happening? You wait until Black Friday, Cyber Monday. That $70 game is $35. Now it's a little bit more accessible. And then you go and you buy 3 or 4 games, and then they all collect dust on your shelf while you play one. But at least it's a different, it's a different level, because I always tell people, if you can sell your games to friends or sell your games to eBay or whatever, do that, and don't sell them to like GameStop, because at least if you buy a $70 game, you play it for 3 months, and you try and sell it to GameStop, they're going to give you $10 for it. At least if you sell it online and you get half of that money back, then the game only cost you $35, and it's not terrible.
Yeah. And then a lot of times people only going to play what they know. So then like a lot of like innovative games get lost.
Yep. A lot of indie stuff gets lost, and then it only picks up steam. And this is when, platforms like Twitch, YouTube, even Instagram and TikTok become crucial, because those games that people didn't know about, all of a sudden now people are streaming them, and they're like, wow, I never played that. Oh, I should check it out. So a lot of people, they never understand the validity and the necessity of services like Twitch, or like I said, YouTube, etc. But I'm like, listen, those games that people have never seen, people never slept on. I mean, I got put onto a game because I don't play on Steam. I'm not a PC gamer. And it was it was literally called Shaolin versus Wu-Tang. And it's a fighting game, same like Street Fighter style, except you're picking different martial artists and different disciplines. But the funny thing is that this company, they definitely didn't pay for any licenses. So a lot of the fighters look like Kickboxer style, looks like Van Damme from Kickboxer, like legit. Or, Kung Fu looks like Jackie Chan. Jeet Kune Do looks like Bruce Lee. So they definitely just go and they're using those likenesses. But the concept is cool because you're using those fighters and they actually fight with like a signature weapon from that discipline. So you have like, Tong Po from Kickboxer movies representing Muay Thai, and he could fight Bolo from Bloodsport. But obviously they're not using those names. They're just using the disciplines. But I saw somebody share that game on TikTok, and they were like, oh, you can find it on Xbox too. And I'm like, really? So I turned on my Xbox, and sure enough, it was there. It was like $6-7. I bought the game and I played it for hours just because it was so easy to pick up and enjoy. But I never would have found out about a game like that without like some sort of TikTok or Instagram or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's just like, that's like another thing about them, like their sharing ability, and people are going to take the risk and be like, oh, this is great.
Yep. I mean, that's that you want to take away that barrier of entry. And I mean, when we were growing up, you'd always check out a game because your friends would recommend it, or they'd be like, yo, I picked this up, man, it's pretty cool. And next thing you know, they'd lend it to you or whatever the case may be. And then you'd go and you'd buy the game. I mean, it's a tale as old as time.
The word of mouth is like the best marketing.
Yep. And I tell people now, YouTube is word of mouth now. TikTok is word of mouth. Instagram is word of mouth. So if you're sharing something, a lot of people just look at it like, oh, you're just sharing pictures of your food or sharing pictures of this. And I tell people, like, there's a bigger narrative here, because if you share if you go out with your family and you go to like a taco place and you share pictures of those tacos on your Instagram, people might be inclined, especially if you put the name of the business, to go check that place out. And next thing you know, it's essentially word of mouth. It's just word of mouth gift wrapped in technology, but still the same thing.
Then I tie it back down to the McDonald's meal. It's like, this is the Travis Scott meal. Then you're just like, Travis Scott? I know Travis Scott.
Exactly. Yep. And the funny thing is, the Travis Scott meal is a Big Mac, a Sprite, and whatever. It's like, yo, come on, man. But hey, it worked. You know what I mean? They got the right demographic. They got the right group of kids to go and spend whatever it costs for that combo. It's hilarious.
Yeah. It's funny how things work.
No, I mean, a lot of stuff, a friend of mine said a while ago, he goes, yo, man, it's not really new ideas. It's reinvented old ideas. And it's funny because you see that play out so much. And a lot of the stuff, I mean, like, a lot of people are talking about like the Squid Game on Netflix, and everybody's like, oh, the Squid Game, blah, blah, blah. And I said, have you ever seen Battle Royale? Battle Royale had the same concept. more, it had a similar concept, obviously not completely the same, but it was similar. And that was even scarier because that used like kids and not adults. And people are like, oh, never heard of it, never seen it. And next thing you know, people are, like The Verge or some of these sites are like, oh, 10 movies that are just like the Squid Game. And of course, Battle Royale is on the list. So same stories.
Yeah, like the Hunger Games or like them in Wonderland.
Yep. Look, Hunger Games is a great same thing. Hunger Games is this you're gift wrapping the same context, and again, just adults out there got to kill each other to protect a larger group of people.
Yeah, I think that's a good time to end. Unless you have any questions for me.
Actually, you have a pretty solid format for what you're doing. I was looking at some of your stuff, and my question to you is, how long have you been doing it? Because you're pretty comfortable doing this stuff for a while now.
This is my second year.
Really?
Yeah.
Good stuff, man. And everything you've done, you've self-taught, like you've taught yourself editing, everything else.
Yeah, I did like a little bit of running like the programs in college because my minor was media arts. And then
okay.
Yeah, and I learned marketing, studied marketing. So with that, I kind of just like took those skills, and then with computers, I've been pretty good with them. So I was able to like whatever I need to know, I could just look it up and then recreate.
That's awesome, man. I as a creator that's been in the game for a while, man, I'm definitely I like your approach to it, and the fact that you're telling a lot of these more humanized stories, but gift wrapping them in tech and people's interests. I think it works out well.
Thanks.
Definitely keep it up, man. I respect what you're doing.
And I'm pretty comfortable talking to people, so that was like easier to do.
No, absolutely. It definitely shows. I figured, I'm like, oh, he's been doing this for a while, because you recognize like the skill set, and the editing and the stuff. But listen, much respect, man. You're doing a great job.
Thanks. And the last question is, what would you name your origin story?
Using podcasting to go from nothing to something.
Nice.
That's a good way to use that and show respect to the medium.
Cool. So since that's it, do you have anything you want to share with people in terms of where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can pretty much find all of our gaming, entertainment, and pop culture content on rageworks.net. From comic books to action figures to video games to movies, we're the gears in the pop culture machine when it comes to that. For my podcast, which is Toys and Tech of the Trade, you can find it on the Rageworks Podcast Network, which is rageworksnetwork.com. You can also find it on any podcast platform of your choice, along with all of our other shows. And pretty much social media is Rageworks on everything. Instagram, same thing. YouTube, it's official Rageworks, and Facebook, it's official Rageworks. But for the most part, it's some deviation of the same name, and you can find all of our content on those sites. Our YouTube channel has, toy reviews, product reviews, some of our podcasts, tech stuff, etc. You can find that there as well.
Right. Nice. Thank you again for joining the podcast.
Of course, man. I'm glad we took the time. We got to have that conversation and chop it up, and I was able to give you, 45 minutes, almost an hour of stuff. Hopefully your audience enjoys it.
Right. Thanks. That brings another episode of the Let's Get Podcast to a close. Again, you can find out more information about Rageworks by clicking the link in the description below. For next week, I have Ashley Evans to speak about her book, Unpolished Diamond. Hope you tune in next day, and I hope to see you there.